Earlier this week, the Trump administration announced a new policy that will prohibit asylum for felons, gang members, and those convicted of domestic violence. Joining us with more on the policy is political commentator Esther Valdez Clayton. Good morning, Esther.
Good morning, Allie.
So first, before we get to the new policy, I want to first say that in the debates, immigration was quite a hot topic touched on by both candidates. Your thoughts?
Yes, it was very surprising. I think it was a last-minute addition because of so many immigration developments this week. First of all, the Supreme Court announced that it would hear 2 immigration cases related to the Trump policy of diverting Pentagon funds to fund the border wall. The second case that the Supreme Court agreed to hear early next year is the very controversial Remain in Mexico policy. For those of you unfamiliar with that, is that the Trump administration is holding approximately 50 to 60,000 asylum seekers in border towns such as Tijuana, where they are waiting for their asylum cases to be heard here in San Diego. So they're only allowed entry into the United States the day of their court hearing. And that is drastically different than allowing them to stay here, work here, live here, have their families while their years-long cases are heard. In the debate, of course, and you alluded to that, the topic of the moment was the 545 children that NBC reported that had been separated from their families due to the Trump administration policy and had yet to be reunited with their parents. So there were a lot of back and forth. And of course, Biden famously said that he regretted and he admitted to having made a mistake in terms of the Obama administration's failure to effectuate meaningful immigration reform during his 8 years in tenure.
Yeah, interesting, because all of a sudden nationally, the term coyotes, which is one that we're familiar with in San Diego, being a border town, suddenly was being talked about everywhere, it seemed like.
Yes, and a lot of people are unfamiliar with that. Coyote is a human smuggler, and that's the correct terminology. But the slang for that has always been coyotes. And unfortunately, the people who were trafficked by these human traffickers are called pollos, which is like chickens or chicks or hens, very vulnerable populations. However, a lot of liberal commentators took exception to that, saying that they were unfamiliar with that Trump was using an animalistic epithet yet again against Latino communities. But really what it does is characterizes how prevalent this is, how illegal immigration actually hurts and harms the most vulnerable of people, including women and children. And we just saw 545 children are still in this country without being reunited from their parents. And just yesterday, the Department of Homeland Security spokesman finally responded to these allegations saying, we have connected with 485 of the alleged parents of these children, and they don't want them back. Sadly, they've been abandoned in our country, left with relatives or in the foster care system. A lot of these relatives have made the decision to leave them in America. Again, this is a loser-loser proposition any way you look at it. When you look at illegal immigration, and again, the gauntlet lies with Congress to manage meaningful immigration reform.
Okay, so now this new asylum policy, how will that affect here in San Diego?
Absolutely. When you ask for asylum, you're saying that you have a fear of return. You have a reasonable fear of return. You will be persecuted if you return to your country of origin. Before, there was no such qualifier. Now, with this new regulatory rule that will go into effect in about a month, convicted felons, including those who have possessed or distributed controlled substances, domestic violence abusers that don't even need to be convicted, those with gang-related offenses as well, and people who have any kind of felonies will now effectively be barred from asking for asylum. So before, there was no such qualifier, and now they can't seek that form of relief. And they're going to be very limited in terms of seeking ways to stay here in the United States, because for many other immigration remedies, they also don't qualify because of the felony. So this is finally closing in on a loophole and asking people to not file frivolous asylum claims, and also stating to other countries, and we just saw that Steve Miller gave an interview just yesterday on behalf of the Trump administration, saying not only were they going to crack down on sanctuary city policies, but also ask for more countries to accept more asylum seekers and not just allow the United States to bear the burden alone.
All right, Esther Valdez Clayton, thank you so much for your insight this morning.
Thank you, Allie.
We'll be right back.